and introduce today's expert. So, I am here today with Dr. David Palmater. Dr. Palmater is the clinical director at the Chesapeake Center, and he's a clinical psychologist here in Bethesda, Maryland. He is also on the board of directors of CHAD National and a professor emeritus at Marywood University in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He is board certified by the American Board of Professional Psychiatry or Psychology and is a fellow of the American Psychological Association, the Pennsylvania Psychological Association, and the American Academy of Clinical Psychology. David is also a past president of the Pennsylvania Psychological Association, has authored over 3 dozen publications, including 2 books on promoting resilience in kids, given over 250 professional trainings for over 60 sponsors around the country, and partnered to complete over 300 media projects for outlets such as the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and CNN. So please join me in welcoming David to today's Ask the Expert webinar on empathy or enabling, helping your child with their big emotions. So thank you all for being here, and I will pass it over to you.
Thank you all, yes, for coming. And please note on this first slide here, that's my cell phone number. I'll also have it on this last slide because I'm going to fire hose you today with stuff. I'm kind of like if you go to your grandmother and she keeps feeding you and feeding you and you're like, enough, grandma, but she keeps feeding you more and more. So I'm kind of be like that today with the stuff I'm going to give you, hopefully practical and usable stuff. But as you're processing it and you have questions that come up tomorrow, a week from today, 6 months from now, you have my cell and you can be in touch or email. So this is, and I will have it again on the last slide too. So let me show you the outline. I want to set a context. There's some important context for the things I'm going to cover with you guys. I want to cover what I believe are the 2 leading causes for what we're calling big emotions today. 3 different strategies you can do to respond or help your kid with big emotions. And then, as Julianne mentioned, we're going to have some Q&A. I also want to tell you that we're going to have 2 of you be winners of my parenting book. This is 10 strategies that parents can do to promote resilience in their kids. So the 2 of you who offer the best comment or question by Julianne's judgment, and she told me she doesn't want all that pressure, but
Yes.
that's why she's paid all this money at Chesapeake. So she's going to decide who the 2 winners are, and we'll make sure to get your address. I also do want to say about today that this is for educational purposes only. Yes, I'm going to be giving you interventions. And yes, these are science-based, and yes, they're meant to be helpful. But for a given kid, they might not be the best thing or the right thing. So you're the world's leading expert on your child, and you'll decide if this educational content has application. And then also, these interventions, I consider them like patches on a tire. Like if you need a tire, you put a patch on, and who knows how long it'll hold. Maybe it'll be wonderful and it'll go months, and then other times maybe it won't satisfy at all. So these interventions I'm going to give you today, consider patches, and then I'll talk about what you can do if you might want more. I will also share that Julianne didn't mention in my bio, but I am also a magician. That's my regular wallet of my little bit of money in it and my driver's license and such. So if any of you would like magic at the end of today, you have to put it in the chat because I'm going to need at least 12 people to say they want to see magic, and then I'll include some before I sign off at the end. Okay, let's get to some context. First thing, it's important, and I was working with kids 10 years before I had my first kid. We parents, we love our kids so much, it makes us crazy people. I was in those 10 years before I had my own child, it would seem to me that some of the parents I worked with would become temporarily insane or get easily offended by things I said, or I was trying to be helpful. But what I learned within 24 hours of having my first child is that this love we have for our kids, it's bigger than our bodies are meant to handle, like breaks us down at a cellular level. I remember as soon as I met my eldest daughter, I was struck by I was having a hard time drawing breath. the love I was feeling for her was just so overwhelming. It felt like my body was sort of coming apart. And it does explain many of the kind of crazy reactions we have. And I'll be talking about those today. As illustrating of this too, I have this little graphic. And for some reason, it's looking for me to say okay to the waiting room and not letting me advance here. Can you let everybody in who wants to get in? Because it looks like it's stuck there. Can you hear me, Julianne?
Sorry, I forgot I was unmuted. Do you want to unshare your screen and then reshare? Everybody is in, but it might have just um
Sure.
glitched for a second. Sorry, everyone. Little technical difficulties.
Okay, there we go. There's the
There we
next
go.
slide. Oops, we got too far ahead. Now it stopped my share. Let me go back to that. As is commonly said, people make plans and God's amused, right?
Yep.
Let's see here. I might also have too many things open on my computer.
Okay, so we are seeing the proposed solutions document.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to quit a few things here. I think that might be the problem. Bear with me, folks, a little bit of adjustment.
I hope we're all used to these little tech snafus at this point in time.
Okay. And
I think we also have enough contenders to do magic at the end.
try this once more now. Sorry about this.
Totally fine. Just let me know if I can help. I think it's a good time to do the reminder. Oh,
Okay.
perfect.
All right. Back to this. Big emotions.
And for those of us just joining us, we just have a little bit of a tech issue, but I think we're good. Yes.
Is it just the single or the single slide showing, Julianne?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, good. So this is an example of parental lunacy. I mean, is there any other relationship where this would be tolerated? Like the one end goes up the child's clogged nose and the other end goes in the parent's mouth. And well, let's be face it, it's going to be the mother's mouth. And the mother sucks out the gunk. For a year, I consulted with the Navy SEAL community, and I joked with them. Imagine two SEALs out in the jungle. They're on a mission. One of them comes sick. They call up the medic, explain the situation. Just take this tube and stick it up your buddy's nose and suck out. And he gets off the phone, and his friend goes, "Well, what did he say?" He said, "Oh, man, there's nothing we can do for you." So there's not many relationships that would tolerate that, but we parent lunatics will do it. All right, so you're the world's leading expert on your child. That's just the case. I'm the world's leading expert together with my wife on my 3.0 children also. So that's important to keep in mind. Also, if you're parenting with intention half the time, like you're ahead of the class. You are ahead of the class. I find parental guilt is almost as common as this crazy love, feeling that everybody else is out there doing it better because of the social media barrages we inflict on each other. What you're seeing there on the screen doesn't exist. That does not, I mean, I sort of imagine what would happen, taking a closer look at this picture, what happened right before. Like, notice how the girl on the end has different shoes than her sisters. I imagine the wife told the husband, just one thing you have to do only, just stop at home and get the matching shoes. And he forgets. And he shows up as he's getting the youngest one out of the car. The Starbucks spills all over his pants. So the mom has the younger one sit on his father's lap so that they won't see the Starbucks stain. And when get done, she's not talking to him for the rest of the night because he had one thing to remember and one thing only, and he didn't remember it. So this is just an illusion. This doesn't exist. This is what exists. A lived mission doesn't happen in between the lines. It's a bumbling and tumbling cacophony of mess, joy, tears, laughter, inspiration, and exhaustion. That's why I'm not a big fan of the term work-life balance. I do think it's an important concept, but it conjures up images of harmony, of things being ordered at work and at home. And I've never seen that. It might exist, but I've never seen that. And then, of course, there's also just the profound bone-crunching exhaustion. For years, I taught graduate students, and sometimes I'd have, I was never a male graduate student, but I've had a number of female graduate students in my office wondering about the pros and cons of having a child at which stage in life. And what's it like? You've got three, you're a psychologist. And I said, there's just no way you can reason to two things. You can't reason to how much love you'll feel. I don't care how much love you've had in your life. There's nothing like this. There's no way you can imagine it. So if you want that human experience, full throttle ahead. And you've never had so much exhaustion. You can't reason to how bone crunching, tiring it is. So that actually, now that the kids are medicated, I thought it might be a good time for us to have sex. Marriage satisfaction is a U shape. There's before kids, it's up here, then we have kids and it goes down, and then the kids leave home and it goes back up. Or this is some talking about that snow globe unrealistic stuff. The reason why these tweets tend to be funny is they're reflecting more truth of family life. I wish the urgent care waiting room wasn't the time and place my 6-year-old decided to start singing Sexy and I Know It, yet here we are. Or modern parenting is making sure your kids say please when they ask Alexa to say something or play something. Or a 9-year-old, who took my hair tie? Me, I didn't. 9-year-old, I didn't ask who didn't. Or I cut the crust off of my daughter's PB&J, and I swear to God, I heard her whisper that I'm her bee now. All right, so there's two parenting models out there in the culture. And I'd like you to decide which one you think is true. One of them is absolutely false, and one of them is absolutely true. The research makes it crystal clear. There's no ambiguity about it. So the sculpting model on the left is kids are born like a lump of clay, and their personalities are fashioned by their experience and by their parents. The one on the right, the shepherding model, is that parents, a lot of kids' personalities are set at birth, or a range of them set at birth, and parents are merely shepherds guiding in different directions. So put in the chat which one you think is the right one. Do you think it's the sculpting one or the shepherding? Sculpting or shepherding? Which one's the right? What are you seeing, Julianne?
I'm seeing both, and then I'm seeing a lot of shepherding.
Well, you are correct. It's shepherding. It's not even. I think the sculpting theories, they were those in psychology, were authored by men who weren't around babies very much. Because if you're around babies, you can see right from jump, they're very different before their parents had any opportunity to mess them up. Very different. Genetically influenced personality characteristics. It's called temperament. And we're all a mixture of fortunate and unfortunate temperaments. Being outgoing, hard to ruffle, open to new experience, fortunate ones. Other people are inconvenienced by the presence of humans on the planet, easily agitated. And we're all a mix of temperamental strengths and weaknesses. And as Popeye said, at the end of the day, I am who I am. This is a illustration of that. Jimmy, 6th generation pain in the egg. or certain periods of time are rough. In adolescence, your self-entitlement is sucking all the fulfillment out of motherhood, where these people that we love more than our own life become their own version of lunatics for about 10 years or so. My kids are all in their 20s now. I'm so glad to be on the other side of it. And my heart goes out with my clients who have adolescents. All right. I mentioned I think there's two primary causes for big emotions. One of them is due to temperament. And there's a type of temperament called the highly sensitive child. It's called other things. For you, those of you that are research geeks like me, you looked in the empirical literature, look for behavioral inhibition, and an author named Kagan. It's also sometimes called sensory processing sensitivity. But what I'm going to run through here is 22 signs of this temperament. So as I go through, just create, one column, check marks for your kid you're thinking of, and do one for yourself too. See how many you check off on. And I'll just name them, and then I'll tell you how many you need to be over the line. Startles easily. Someone touches them and there's a sound. Complains about scratchy clothing, seams in socks, or labels against their skin. Doesn't usually enjoy big surprises. Learns better from a gentle correction than strong punishment. Seems to read my mind. Uses big words for their age. Notices the slightest odor. Has a clever sense of humor. Seems very intuitive. Doesn't do well with big changes. Wants to change clothes if wet or sandy. Asks lots of questions. Is a perfectionist. Almost done. Notices the distress of others. Prefers quiet play. Asks deep, thought-provoking questions. Is very sensitive to pain. Is bothered by noisy places. Notices subtleties. Considers if it is safe before climbing high. Performs best when strangers aren't present. Feels things deeply. So those 22, you need 13 to be over the line. I mean, I've got 18. And some of the best therapists I've known, I think, also have this temperament because we see stuff. We perceive stuff, which is very useful when you're a therapist. But there's also a lot of downside to it too. Two highly sensitive people married to each other would cause a lot of stress. Fortunately, many of us who are HSPs are married to people who are not HSPs. And I will tell you how you can read more about highly sensitive kids before I'm done. My kids are voluntarily doing chores right now. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm going to pretend like everything is normal. My daughter told me I was embarrassing her, and I told her to stop being so cringe and bougie and just let me just flex. Or my kid's sandals were bothering her, so I reached into my purse, desperately looking for something that would fix it, and pulled out a random pair of socks, thereby saving the day. And no one around me clapped. All right, so the second most popular cause of big emotions are kids that have ADHD. And it used to be back in the day that we didn't think adults had ADHD. And the first one who started writing a lot about that was a man named Paul Winder. And he developed a list of criteria for adult ADHD. And one of them was excessive anger. Well, we now believe that people with ADHD don't necessarily have more anger. But what happens is, think about the next time you have an emotion that you're debating whether or not you should express. Someone cuts you off in the Starbucks line and you're debating whether or not to tell this person they were rude and they should get in the back of the line or whatever. You're probably doing self-talk. You're deciding, how are they likely to react? Will I feel guilty later if I'm rude? and you're talking to yourself and you're deciding what to do with that feeling. But that's something that biologically is less efficient with people that have ADHD, at least untreated, where you're not stopping to think. And so your emotions, you're not stopping to consider whether you want to modulate them or not. You're just expressing them. And so a lot of kids with ADHD, especially untreated ADHD, seem to have stronger emotions, but it's more just about this issue of self-talk. So we parents, when we're dealing with a kid with big emotions, we have all kinds of strategies that have been tried. Here's one. See that little kid out there, Ricky? He wouldn't stop crying either. By simply attaching the new Acme Wing Baby, airlines can significantly improve their passengers' overall comfort. Or here we have advanced parenting techniques. Now remember, they can't climb, so as long as you stay in bed, there will be no problems. So, I mean, I love parents like those parents because they have energy and they just need some good ideas and everything's going to be fine. All right, so before I get to the first idea, which is very powerful for this problem we're talking about today, I need to just talk about the fight-flight system or the sympathetic nervous system. Just a second. So God forbid tonight you heard the sound of breaking glass where you live. You're up on the second or third floor, you hear breaking glass, you think someone's breaking in. Within seconds, there are going to be dozens of changes in your body, from your top of your brain, tips of your toes. It's kind of like a science fiction movie where the starship's going to go into battle. They say, take the energy from the kitchen. We don't need that. Put it in the shields. Nobody's on deck 5. Put that in the weapons. Well, that's exactly what our body does when we think there's a threat, which makes us very good at dealing with it, at either combat or getting the heck out. We've had centuries of evolution making us very good at changing our bodies to help with that. The problem is that if there's not a real threat, the changes that happen in us and our body are unwelcomed. Like when the sympathetic nervous system is active, we're very narrow focused on the threat. Also, the parts of us that are most intelligent, the parts that we most think of ourselves as the CEO of me, prefrontal cortex, takes a nap because you don't need to analyze stuff. You need to be Action Jackson. You don't want to be a professor when you're dealing with a threat. So the professor part of my brain can go take a nap, right? But when there's not a threat, we like that best part of our brain. There's also a substance called cortisol, very good at helping muscles deal with the threat, a toxin in the body, if it's in a kind of sustained fashion. So what we have in the case of kids who are anxious is we have kittens that seem like tigers. And that temperament I mentioned a moment ago, the highly sensitive child, 3 times the risk of developing an anxiety disorder compared to the general population. General population is about 8 to 12% of kids are anxious. HSPs, it's more like a third. So that means most aren't, but that third is like a significantly increased risk. So if I'm anxious, I'm all the time thinking that kittens, getting on the school bus, giving the wrong answer in class, introducing myself to a friend, these are very dangerous situations. Or I might be living in a life where there's lots of tigers, lots of real things. I mean, sometimes we feel like we woke up in the middle of a country western song with all the bad stuff that's going on at the same time. Or people just don't have strategies for coping. They haven't had the benefit of hearing from a mental health professional on the best strategies, because there's a lot of misguided information on the internet. So I want to give you one that you can do in 3 minutes. And in order to show you the power of this, we need to do it live. I'm going to pull out my phone and launch my stopwatch so that I don't go 1 second over 3 minutes to make the point. Before I start my stopwatch, I'd like you each to get as comfortable as you can in what you're sitting in and close your eyes. I mean, you could listen along, but you're just not going to get the benefit of everybody else. But if you're willing, close your eyes, get as comfortable as you can. And I'm starting my clock now. I'd like you to bring your attention to your breath. and pretend like your lungs are in your lower belly instead of your chest cavity. And breathe in more deeply than you would when you're not thinking about it. Pause 1001 at the top and then breathe out more deeply also. So imagine two potato chips, one that's on your chest and one that's on your belly. The one on your chest should barely move, if at all, whereas the one on your belly should rise and fall rhythmically so that someone across the room could see it rising and falling. Keep breathing like that. And now bring your attention to your hands and fingers and try to make them as relaxed as possible. Don't shake them, don't move them around. Just use your wonderful, beautiful mind to see just how relaxed you can get your fingers and palms. And now your lower arms. A totally relaxed muscle has three characteristics. One is it's obviously soft. And now your upper arms. The second is a sense of weight. So in a completely relaxed state, it can almost seem like your arms are sagging out of your shoulder sockets from the weight of the relaxation. And now let it spread to your neck and shoulders. It's good to do this with your head supported if you do it in the future, so your neck doesn't have to work. Relax your jaw and tongue. Some people, when they relax their jaw, their mouth wants to open. If you're one of those people, let that happen. Relax your cheeks. It can seem like they're sagging down your face from the weight of the relaxation. Relax your eyes. Make your forehead as smooth and calm as a pond on a summer morning. Relax your chest, which should barely be moving, if at all. Relax your belly, which is rising and falling as rhythmically as the waves come in and out at the beach on a calm day. The third characteristic of that relaxed muscle is a sense of weight. So feel your whole body starting to sink down into the chair from the weight of the relaxation. A completely relaxed muscle is like a cooked piece of pasta. It's soft, heavy, and warm. And now let the relaxation spread to your thighs and hamstring muscles. And now your calf muscles. It almost seems like your calves could be sagging down your legs from the weight of the relaxation. And now your feet, ankles, and toes. Now taking an extra deep breath into your belly and let it out slowly. Okay, folks, you can open your eyes. It's exactly 3 minutes to the second. Put in the chat how that felt to do. Who doesn't have 3 minutes? Our presidential candidates have 3 minutes. Duck into a stall, duck into a car. Everybody has 3 minutes. This is the protocol here. Now, I've also recorded this on YouTube. If you just go to YouTube, type in my last name and 3 minutes to a better you, it comes up. After you've listened to it 5 or 6 times, you don't need the recording anymore, though. You'll just have it memorized and you can use it. Just like one of those movies where there's a ticking time bomb and someone comes along and clips a wire, that's how fast you can deactivate the sympathetic nervous system. It just takes the practice. I'm assuming most of you haven't had the practice, so you can see that even the 3 minutes will do a job, do a benefit for most people. However, you can advance it even further. Aspire to zip it with high beats per minute. There's these little, I have one over here on my desk. I sometimes have couples put on when they're working with me. Once you get into triple digits on your beats per minute, it might be good, to wait to talk further. In all my years, I've never had a client say to me, and I've never said to the man in the mirror, geez, I wish you would have spoken up quickly about that upset feeling that you had. But so many times, the man in the mirror and my clients are grateful for having waited till the sympathetic nervous system is not firing before talking. Now, if you want to develop this further, I have some resources online here. You have to build up muscle memory. So there's a 15-minute progressive muscle relaxation exercise and then a 30-minute one. Usually I have kids or hyperactive adults do the 15-minute one, and I have everybody else do the 30-minute one. And that's going to build up muscle memory. Once you have done that, maybe 12 to 13 times, then you can start measuring using biofeedback devices. And I'll tell you about some of those before we're done. My favorite one is the M-Wave, but there are multiple ones that could work. And then figuring out a way to integrate biofeedback into your weekly life. I usually recommend 10 minutes 3 times a week. Some people love to do more, some do less. But getting your pasta muscles and belly breath in a clear mind, those 3 elements, clear mind, pasta muscles, belly breath, it's a Captain America shield against anxiety. Anxiety cannot touch you. It's physiologically impossible for anxiety to touch you, for anger to touch you, if those 3 things are true of you also. So you can backward engineer yourself being able to become a relaxation ninja or your kid. Parenthood in one picture. I want you to have everything in this world that your heart desires. Can I have ice cream? No. All right. The second of the 3 strategies is to use empathy. Before I get into this, Julianne, are there any questions so far?
No questions so far. This has been great. Everyone's saying how relaxed they feel after that as well. So thank you for that.
Good, good, good.
Oh, and I guess a question was, what was the first strategy? Can you just kind of summarize?
So the first one is just the pasta muscles and the belly breath,
Yes.
which you can do in 3 minutes. Get yourself relaxed. So you're activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the opposite one. How I remember that when I was first memorizing these things was sympathetic, because I feel sympathy for anybody having the sympathetic nervous system activated. And then parasympathetic is the opposite. All right, so the power of empathy. See, this is where our parent lunacy comes in, right? Those of us who are engaged in parenting, we all know that when our kid hurts, we hurt worse. We hurt worse. And we don't want to hurt worse. We want our kid to stop hurting. And we want that to happen as soon as possible. And we have a lot of life experience we bring to bear to try to have that happen as soon as possible. But unfortunately, as understandable as that motive is, it's often not helpful to the emotional development of our child. Let me elaborate. So first of all, one of the things that's confusing, I think, is that depression and grief feel the same, but they're very different and they require very different reactions. Depression is based on lies. Depression is like an internal enemy, like from Invasion of the Body Snatchers, that convinces its host that everything sucks. It's its host's fault, and that's not going to change. And when you think that way long enough, all of a sudden, like suicide starts feeling like a rational choice. But it's all based on lies. And the treatment for it is to help people to understand the lies and what the truth is and how they can use the truth. So that is not to be leaned into. Leaning into depression gets people addicted and suicidal and all kinds of things, divorces. Grief, however, is true. I have gotten a bad grade. I did get dumped by my girlfriend. I didn't make the all-star team, and I'm hurting over it. Well, that's a true thing and needs a very different kind of response. Imagine you had an iron gate on your property and it was starting to rust, right? 2 scenarios, you just paint over it. Well, there's some upside to that, right? You fix it quick. But how long will it last? So often with anger, sadness, anxiety, when it's based in a true event, we want to paint over it and start talking about the silver lining. Go to any funeral in America and listen to the things that are said with very good intentions to the person that's just lost someone they love a lot. Oh, she's in a better place now. And I'm sure a year from now that you're going to feel much better. It's going to be rough, stuff like that. Very well intended. How many people instead can be with that person in their suffering? I had a friend of mine in a former life. I was in the Catholic seminary and I studied 2 years in Rome in what was called the Bishop Factory. And one of my classmates, Pat, was in remission from leukemia. And Pat, when we were in Rome, his leukemia cropped back up and he had to come back to the States for treatment. He ended up dying. But within 6 to 8 weeks of Pat's death, he told his parents he didn't want any more visitors, which really shocked them. I mean, because they were already losing their minds, as you could imagine. They thought the visitors were a support, but Pat explained to them, I just don't have the strength to pretend anymore that they're lifting me up. Can we be with another person when they're hurting? If you've ever suffered a significant loss and you've had that friend who can let you be repetitive and not try to fix it and not try to solve it, but just be with you with loving kindness, well, we find our friends in the fire, don't we? On the other hand, if we try to just smooth it all over, that's when our suffering can be prolonged, because buried alive pain is buried alive. It's not buried dead. And it becomes zombified. It's almost like one of those zombie movies where they're having a picnic, it's a sunny day, and all of a sudden, monsters are attacking. Well, that's what it's like when I have buried alive feelings. I was taught this through personal experience after 9/11. So at that point in my career, I would deal with problems, pain, by thinking of it as a campaign to conquer. And so I set up these discussion groups all across Marywood University in Scranton, arranged for about 12 of my friends to lead those discussion groups for members of the public, went on radio, TV, newsprint, marketing, the whole thing, arranged for a social justice panel with myself and a colleague. About 100 people came and talked about how this isn't a cry for war and all that, did all that stuff. And I'm talking in front of students about would they like to be involved in any of these things? And I'm right in the middle of it and I break down crying. I couldn't continue. I had not dealt with my own feelings about 9/11 and I had jumped into action and my feelings became zombified. The unfaced and unfelt parts of our psyche are the source of all neurosis and suffering. I cannot tell you the kind of liberation that people experience when they excavate buried alive pain. So with our child, the first thing, is this a true thing? I mean, it's one thing to come home and, it's depression or it's something else, and there's separate protocols for that. And if you want, I can say a little bit about what those look like. But if something's happened that really sucks, empathy first. Then reassurance second, and maybe not even immediately. I had a man I worked with once he was very harsh with himself. And it's amazing how often, if I'm harsh with myself, I'm also harsh with others. They're highly correlated. If I'm loving towards myself, I'm more likely to be loving towards others too. So we worked on his harshness, which involved the self-compassion exercise, and he got really good at it. And because he got so good at self-compassion, it helped him with his daughter. His daughter was 10. And the year before, she had tried out for an all-star basketball team, didn't make it, was devastated by it. And her father and she developed a plan for the year, got her extra coaching, actually put in a mini little basketball court in the back of their property so they could practice together, did all kinds of things. Following year, she tries out, she doesn't make it. He goes into her bedroom that night. She's crying on her bed. There was all kinds of reassuring thoughts in his head. Honey, I've noticed that the girls that made the team, it was all the coaches' kids and their friends. Oh, and you'll have more time to do your homework now. That's been a real pressure. And you enjoy field hockey more anyway, and you can invest more. All those thoughts were in his head. He didn't say any of it because of our work and his own self-compassion work. He sat down next to her. This is really hard, isn't it? And she buried his face into his chest and started crying more, which felt to him like he was on the wrong path. But he had intellectual understanding given our work. And so he just stayed with it and just made empathic remarks, not a lot of them, and just rubbed her back. And her tears ran out. And he felt it wasn't the right time for reassurance. So he just kissed her on the forehead and said, I'll be downstairs if you need anything. Hour later, she comes to him, takes his face in her hands, pulls him close, and said, "You're the world's best father." He hadn't solved anything. He hadn't fixed anything. He didn't give her any reassurances. And think about yourself when you've suffered and you have someone who's just with you with loving kindness and empathy. Now, keep in mind, this trips people up sometimes. Empathy is not agreement, right? I can be empathic with someone and think they've made a very wrong choice. But letting them know that I understand the human condition that drove that choice is so important for getting to the more difficult discussion later. It also doesn't mean justification. So if my kids made a mistake, sure, I want to go through the sequence of being empathic to letting them know I understand the context, but then work with them on what they can do to make it right. Because we do have a lot of self-entitlement. It may be wrong, but it's how I feel. This idea that all opinions are equally valid. It's intellectual relativism, and it drives professors across America crazy when it's in their classroom. Everybody has an equal right to an opinion, but not all opinions are equally correct. Sometimes opinions can't be determined which is equally correct. You know, it's just not empirical question. But I think when we're over promoting our kids' narcissism, we can sometimes get this. Okay, so I want to show you a brief video that I use all the time. I once used it with my relationship with my son too. When you have a kid with consistent emotional challenges, and you as a parent lunatic, you're trying to help, but your efforts seem to make things worse. Like that's what happens with depression. A parent trying to reassure a depressed child usually is like throwing gas on the fire, which is completely counterintuitive. And if you want, I can explain why that happens later. But after years of years of trying to be helpful, and not only doesn't it work, but it seems to make things worse, there could be some distance that starts to grow. And a sense of, geez, I love you, but I don't like you very much, and I don't really want to spend a lot of time with you. It's human. So when parents have experienced that, I'll show them this video, and then I'll tell you about a link. This is a father rendering a prayer about his son. The images don't matter so much, but the lyrics, I find these lyrics are commonly experienced in parenting. And so it's about a father praying about his son, but I'll tell you about a video of a mother and her daughter that you can also look at later. Let's watch this though.
Down on my knees again tonight. Hoping this prayer will turn right. See, there is a boy that needs your help. Done all that I can do myself. His mother is tired. I'm sure you can understand. Tonight as he sleeps, she goes and holds his hand, and she tries not to cry as the tears fill her eyes. Can you hear me? I getting through tonight? Can you see it? Can you make it feel alright? If you can hear me, let me take his place somehow. See, he's not just anyone, he's my son.
So get the idea there. That link is to the mother-daughter one. And it should be easy to find this one on YouTube, but if you can't find it, just send me an email and I'll send you a link for this video of the father prayer also. All right. Probably one of the most common parenting questions that come up is how do I promote self-esteem in my child? Because our time pressures are so crushing. It seems like we have less time available for relationships in our lives. And we know the time is precious and we want to promote self-esteem. I mean, we don't want our child to become a serial killer or end up in jail or those kinds of things. So we all have these aspirations for our children about having good self-esteem, and we know how to do it. So there's two elements really. There's a sense of worthiness and a sense of competence. If a person has a sense of worthiness, they have a sense of being, they deserve to take up the same amount of space as everybody else. I'm not over apologizing for myself. I'm not excusing myself and my needs. I'm worthy. A sense of competence is I do important things in the world that matter, and people see it. So a sense of worthiness without a sense of competence can promote self-entitlement, like from the cartoon with the math a moment ago. A sense of competence without a sense of worthiness, my self-esteem is a roller coaster ride, depending on what messages I got from the universe that day or that week. It's up and down, depending. So the competence is easier. I mean, I have adults come to me with self-esteem problems, and they can learn and they can fix the competence part. The worthiness is harder. It's a tougher nut. And it really depends a lot on relationships with adults in childhood, which leads to the exercise, special time. But we have a cultural problem with time. We tell ourselves that the time I'm going to give to relationships is the time that's left over after I've gotten my obligatory stuff done. Gotten work done, I've gotten the taxes done, I've gotten the stuff done that has to get done. And now I'm going to relax in my relationships. Well, the households I'm familiar with, my personal life, my professional life, that extra time doesn't exist. That's as mythical as the unicorn. How many times? I wish I could create video montages. I've had parents say, "Oh, this week we couldn't do the work we talked about. This week was just so busy." And what I hope they realize with time is, yes, the busyness of this week was unique, but next week brings it's a new, also it's a set of unique busyness and off into the horizon. So any relationship that's built on unicorn time is at risk. And I speculate it's part of why the divorce rate is over 50% in America. Because when I work with couples and they haven't, there hasn't been any serious problems. No one's had an affair. No one's beaten anybody up. They're just on opposite sides of a chasm. Once they learn some basic strategies, they're fine again. And a lot of those strategies have to do with making the time to do the right kinds of things with each other. So too it is with our kids. Okay, kid, busy man here, quality time, here we go. I think kids are getting plenty of quality time. And I see that whenever I try to schedule my next appointment with a lot of my kid clients, and I hear about what we got. I had one kid well, I guess I shouldn't say what they were, but a kid just had a different extracurricular every night of the week. And some of them pretty exotic extracurriculars. And so parents are with them and they're doing quality time. And there's plenty of quality time. It's not about the story. It's about daddy taking time out of his busy day to read you the story. All right, so let's talk about what special time is. And if I tell parents all the time I work with, where I give them, a dozen or so parenting strategies by the time we're done, tell them this is the most important one. If you're only going to do one, this is the one that I would do. I would choose because it's the one that most promotes resilience, besides self-esteem, resilience. And resilience means adversity makes us stronger, wiser, and better. Resilience doesn't mean just getting on the other side of the adversity, surviving it. That's tough. That's being tough. But that's not necessarily being resilient. A lot of people go through adversity and don't advance as human beings, or if anything, they take steps backwards. Resilient is the hit makes me stronger, wiser, and better. And special time, more than any other thing a parent can do, promotes that. All right. The trap of special time is how simple it sounds. It sounds so simple, and it is the hardest parent intervention to do consistently. It's 1 hour a week of doing nothing but those three verbs: undivided attention, no cell phones, no other kids, nobody else. Offering specific, proportionate, and authentic praise for whatever the kid is saying or doing, and then expressing affection. Each of those verbs is important. When we say to kids vaguely, you're smart, you're generous, you're loyal, without it being anchored to a specific example or behavior, it has the exact opposite intended effect. Proportionate. I think because our time is so compressed, we go over the top with our praise in parent culture. Every kid gets a trophy. Where did that idea come from? Or I remember once talking about suffering, right? This is an example, and it also ties in here. I'm coaching 10-year-old baseball. My team's in the championship game with the other team. My team gets up by a run. We're in the bottom inning of the game. The other team's batting. They get bases loaded, 2 outs. This kid comes up to the plate. His performance is going to determine who wins this championship game. He grounds out weakly to the pitcher, who picks up the ball and underhand tosses to my first baseman. We win, they lose. I'm on third base, coaching, jogging over to my dugout across the field. This kid and I cross paths, and as our eyes meet, I hear from behind me in the stands, "Good hit, Peter." And I see the look of confusion and pain on the child's face. Like I just got out. We lost. I didn't do well. This hurts. Right. So if I as a parent continue to give a child that message, I'm either gonna lose credibility, they won't believe me, or they'll start to think they're being cheated and get that self-entitlement thing going. So it's proportionate praise and it's authentic. I mean it. Kid chooses the activity. A lot of kids will say, "I don't know." One of the first things child therapists learn to say to kids when they say, "I don't know," is that's all right. Take your time. We're in no rush. Because kids hate a vacuum. And they will get up and decide to do something. And then as long as you can offer some commentary on it, it'll work.
Can I just
Please.
interject for 1 second? So can you clarify what you mean by attending? And then what is your recommendation for special time when there is more than one child in the household?
Right.
So is it, yes.
Yes. An hour a week for every kid. And I once had a mom who said, "We got 5 kids. What? Are you crazy? Haven't you been listening to our schedules?" I said, "Well, let me change the question. Let's say you bought a house on an acre lot, your first house, and the entire perimeter is adorned with these award-winning rose bushes. And you've never had rose bushes before, so you get a gardener and say, these are beautiful. I want to keep them like this. What do I need to do?" "Well, you need to water, prune, and fertilize them all." "What? I need to water, prune, and fertilize an acre full of rose bushes? Are you crazy? Haven't you been listening to our schedules?" We're just not used to thinking of these minimal investments in each other as requirements for health. So yes, an hour. I mean, when kids come to me, they have a kid with ADHD or defiance or depression, 90% of the things I'm going to do with them are not applicable to the siblings. But this is one for every single kid. And attending is just giving undivided attention. For a teenager, it's going to be, and this is coming up here, it's going to be by way of a discussion. Kid picks the activity. shooting baskets, drawing, playing video games. For years, not for years, it felt like years. I'm exaggerating because I'm a highly sensitive person. But my youngest would go online and color in these dolls. That's what she chose to do. And I would have rather watched paint dry. It was the most boring thing on the planet. And that's one of the features of special time. When you're doing it week in and week out, some of the times you're going to be bored out of your mind, but it still has the impact. I once had a dad, was a single dad. He made, this was in the 80s, like 300,000 a year solving his company's problems, but he couldn't get his 13-year-old to do her homework. And I had him do this intervention first. And he took it on faith and tried it. He came in the following week. I said, what was it like, Bill? He said, oh, it's okay, but I can't wait to get to the homework. That's why we're here. And so I asked the 13-year-old what it was like for her. And like a lot of teens, she said, I don't know. So I said, well, sitting in the front row of a Michael Jackson concert as a 10. And this was when it was his heyday before he ran into trouble. And she was obsessed with him, posters all over her room. Front row Michael Jackson concert at 10, eating a warm cookie was the one. What was this like with your dad? 10. Tearfully, she said 10. She was not an anomaly. Again, I wish I could create video montages. Time after time after time after time, ask kids, what was it like from you 1 to 100 when you and your dad went to Krispy Kreme and he talked with you at the booth? I rarely get under 85, and it's usually pushing 100. And that same parent say, what do you, if you were going to make a guess on what your kid's rating would be about the time at Krispy Kreme? 10, 15. He seemed like I was bothering him. There's just this duality. And even me, when I was teaching this stuff for years, there was a point in my career I was on 2 planes a month. And so I would get home late on Thursdays, and I would do special time rotating with my kids, a Friday morning breakfast very early before school. So there was a period of time, I confess, I'd shake them in the morning and say real softly, I know we're both tired. Would you rather do special time on Saturday and sleep? And they would pop right up and go, no, I want to do it now. So even though I had been teaching this stuff and doing my own kids, I was surprised at the power. So no other verbs describe my behavior. I'm not teaching, I'm not instructing, I'm not learning. If you're biting your tongue, that's another good sign of you're doing special time. I have here a link for how you can get a list of conversation prompts to do with teenagers. Resistance initially, imagine you had a sort of a conflict-laden relationship with a boss and they started acting really nice. It can make you a little suspicious, like, cut my hours, what's going on, what's the agenda? But this kind of attention, unless someone struggles with moderate to severe autism or has other challenges neuropsychologically, this is a universal. This desire to be receiving this kind of attention. A minimal psychological requirement for a healthy relationship, including marriage, friend, whatever it might be.
So just a few clarifying questions about that.
Yeah,
Is it
please.
an hour with each parent? And can it be like an hour split up in increments over the week?
Good question.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you too, where you can read more about it, because I know I'm kind of fire hosing you on the method. But to answer those specific questions, yes, each parent. And I'll tell you the dividends that come later. If your teenager is going to be telling you things that the other parents' teenagers are not telling you. And once they're in their mid to late 20s, I find that's usually around the time, oh man, is the relationship close? And I speculate it has a lot to do with those years of putting in the work on special time. What was the other question, Julian?
So we talked about, could it be like split up incrementally over the week, an hour?
Yes. So most parents do it with 1 hour time because it's hard. You got to stop your life and do this. It is really, really hard. So I used to put mine in my phone Sunday nights. That said, You can do 320s or 230s as you please. That'll work too. And I'll tell you where you can read more about special time before we sign off today, as well as be in touch with me or call me about it. How we look to our teenage kids. By the way, you can really use this when you have teenagers. It's not a major technique, but I use this all the time. I remember telling my 14-year-old oldest daughter, who's now an attorney, that I would hold her hand in church if she didn't do this chore I was trying to get her to do. Or being with my kids in the mall and they're arguing. I say, if you guys don't knock it off, I'm going to go to Victoria's Secret and I'm going to buy something for your mother. And I'm going to come out with the bag. It works. All right, I want to show you another video that speaks to this silent epidemic of guilt that we parent lunatics have at all ages. I mean, I've got to watch myself when I think back. My youngest is now 23, the oldest is 28. And I start thinking about child, and I wish I wouldn't have done that, or I wish I would have done this. We're all vulnerable to it. But I want to show you a video that is more likely to be true.
I'm a perfectionist, and so that's hard with kids. There's definitely days when I have my doubts about my abilities. Struggle with my temper. I struggle with like how I react with situations. I wish I knew how to, I guess, just calm myself before speaking to them.
I wish I was better at taking time to sit down and just listen more to my child.
I wish I was more confident in being a mom. I'm not the most patient person in the world.
Patience. Patience is far and away probably the biggest struggle.
I just want them to know just how much I love them.
My mom is totally awesome. She's fun to snuggle with. Pretty, funny. She does cook a lot of food for me. She's just unique. That's why I love her so much. We go on dates together. Like we go shopping. She loves me a lot. I have a lot of favorite things about my mom. We like to watch movies together and color and stuff.
We go to church together. We volunteer together.
She is like my heart, I guess you could say, because she's that close to me.
My favorite thing is to jump on a trampoline with my mom. That's my most favorite thing, to go up high. We like get ice cream or something and like you go to the nail salon and have fun. My mommy's my hero. She's pretty and beautiful.
She is my hero.
She just will care about me and just always love me forever. She's the best.
That's so awesome.
I always seem to focus mostly on the negative. And I guess I can walk out here and say that I'm doing something great and that my child is viewing me in totally different lenses as I view myself. So that's inspiring.
This is my calling. This is my job. This is what I love to do, and I will do it better and with love each and every day because those kids count on me and they love me for what I'm doing.
That might sound, oh, they just created that. No, that's what I see. Just like I don't see the snow globe, I see the considered chaos all the time. I also don't see this parent guilt that so many carry around as being true. Well, at least as being based on things that the kids would agree the parents should be feeling terrible about. So in the 10 minutes we have, I'm going to share these thoughts, questions you guys have, and then I'll leave you with a magic trick going out the door. So these are some techniques I didn't have a chance to get to today, which can also help with big emotions, problem solving, which I call my drama killer. It's described on the blog there and also in the parenting book that we referenced earlier. Thought testing is really useful when you have a depressed or anxious child because reassurance is usually not where you want to go, but thought testing is. And then self-compassion. That's a good starting point when working with empathy with our kids, is to see what am I like with myself first. If I'm harsh with myself, it's going to be hard for me to be good at empathy with other people. It just will be. So you start with self-compassion, and there's a test where you can take and get a measurement. Kristen Neff, who's the creator of that test, is the grand dame of all things self-compassion. And her website is so generous with resources for promoting self-compassion. And if you want, some point, circle back to me and I can tell you how I do self-compassion with my clients. My phone number is email address. So questions? Anything?
Yeah. Question. So going back to the breathing exercises, what do you suggest when kids are resistant to doing it? It's a hard no. Do you have any good resources? Some were shared in the chat. There's a Go Noodle breathing on YouTube. But what resources do you have for kids who are resistant to that?
So I'm a big fan of having kids earn their pleasures. So if I had a kid that I thought really needed that, guess what? That's how they're earning their cell phone. You do this 3 minutes first, and you've earned your cell phone for today. I'm not taking your cell phone away. I'm not taking it away. You are now earning it or not earning it like the rest of the globe. And this is how you're going to earn. So I think there's a little too much. I mean, parenting, you always want the middle ground, right? If we're all drill instructors and saying, you're going to do it my way, get in line private, I don't care what you think or feel, that's obviously problematic. But I think the culture has shifted more to the other end, that we're so nervous with our kids having uncomfortable feelings that sometimes that means we almost talk to them like they're an adult and parent like they're an adult. And sometimes we just happen to know better. And this is how you're going to earn your cell phone.
Thank you for that. Do you have any modifications about special time if the child that has the big emotions is the sibling of a neurodiverse child who receives a number of services at home?
Even more important there, the special time for that sibling. Yeah. Well, it's implied in the question, the awareness that a lot of times siblings of kids who are neurodivergent feel that the attention balance is out of whack. And some of that's inevitable, and I wouldn't feel guilty about giving the neurodivergent child more. But special time's a nice antidote to it. You get that hour in a week, not quality time, but special time. Oh, I meant to say, with special time, if you go to YouTube again and just type in my name and special time, I have a more in-depth, it's 13-minute review of how to do special time and how it's differentiated from quality time. And chapter 1 in that parenting book is all devoted to special time as well.
Have you dealt with children that seem to get a rush from big emotions? So after the emotion and possible tantrum, they feel a lot better. It's almost a coping mechanism.
I think that catharsis is useful when there's emotions that a person's been warding off that are buried alive and experiencing that. But on the other hand, where it's not helpful, there used to be a thought, anger control, for instance. Let's have someone bash on a punching bag to get the anger out. And that actually seems to worsen anger. So catharsis does have value. It's just not, you just have to be careful with it.
How can you address that to another younger child when attention time is out of whack due to other issues the older child has?
I'd give them empathy for it. I'd have them talking about it. They can draw about it too. Sometimes kids find it easier to express themselves in drawings. And then I would give them empathy for it. I mean, it sucks, right? It sucks. The time that, and how we have to distribute it. That's a true thing, and acknowledging for the child that it's a stress, I think is, helps their emotional development.
I think this will be the last question, and then hopefully we have time for a magic trick, and you're welcome to send questions afterwards. But do you have any resources for developing confidence in children?
Yes, the short formula there, and I think I have some articles on my blog, hecticparents.com, about it. Figure out what your kid's top strengths are, and by that you have to travel far and wide to find someone as good at that thing as your child. It's a statistical fact, barring brain damage, we all have top strengths. I don't have time to make that case, but one of my math professor friends called it a statistical certitude. We all have top strengths. Find your kids and then figure out with them how they can use it to make the world a better place. And then you're talking about having electricity flowing through their veins. And for high school students, for figuring out what they want to do with their life, it's not pursuit of a job, which is grinding through a week so you can do what you really want to do on the weekend. That's to lead a life of silent desperation, going to the grave with the songs to lend them, what Thoreau wrote. A mission is you know what your top strengths are, and you're using it to make differences in the world without self-doubt, without telling myself, who am I to take that problem on? And if you're doing that as a human being, you're going to have electricity in your veins in your vocational life. And the idea of not doing it is inconceivable.
Thank you so much. And like I said in the chat, we are going to share the name of the book, follow up with additional resources. If you have questions, Dr. Palmer has also graciously provided some contact information, which I'll include as well.
Yes. And so now a quick trick. This is totally gratuitous, fun for us, hopefully. So I have here my watch, my regular watch, and a deck of cards. And what I need someone to do is to think of a time that matters to you, a time where something important happened. And I'm going to try to think about what that time is now. Okay, I'm getting something and I'm changing the time on my watch. And now it is face down, and we'll see later. Could someone type in the chat the time that you're thinking of? And Julianne, let me know the first one that appears.
We have a 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. Is someone willing to say what makes 3 o'clock important, or is it might be too personal? No? Okay. Second one is.
Sorry, it was pick their child up from school.
All right. We'll see. We'll see what I put on my clock. This now is a date. I took out the two jokers, and wrote a date, a month and a day on the two jokers. They're turned upside down in the deck. I've already did that before we started. I just had a feeling of a date that one of you would name. So could someone type the date you're thinking of in the chat box?
We have 9/11.
9/11. Here's the one. It's the other one. And you guys can see that there's no other face down cards in the deck. So what was the time?
3 o'clock.
Okay, I got 3:30.
Okay, we had a good amount of like 3:30, 3:25.
And then for the time, Or the date, I'm sorry.
Wow.
See, what's hard about being a magician virtually is I would now expect you to be losing your minds and clapping and all that stuff. I just have to imagine.
But
All right, thank you.
I can attest to the unbelievable magic that comes from this. I have no idea how he does it. So stay tuned for future Ask the Experts, and maybe you'll be able to see some more magic. But please join me in thanking Dr. Palmater for his time. And we appreciate you all for spending the day with us. So we'll be sending
Thank you all.
shortly.
Thank you. Don't hesitate to be in touch.
All right. Bye-bye.